Welcome to Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. I'm Melly, and this is the podcast for people who are determined to find a glimmer of hope even while the fires of life are burning around them. Together, we'll dumpster dive through all sorts of topics like divorce, dating, friendships, grief, career ups and downs, and so much more. All with a sense of humor and absolutely no toxic positivity. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. Today's episode is From Chaos to Calling: How to Turn Life's Challenges into Purpose. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Chris Meston, who is a transformation life purpose coach, helping singles reclaim passion and transform their pain and purpose in 60 days. He is also the host of the podcast Path to Purpose. Welcome, Chris. We're excited to have you here today.
Hey, Melly, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here as well and to have this conversation.
I'm excited to dive into today's topic. This is a big one. I know a lot of my listeners are dealing with those chaotic situations and trying to figure out how to turn that into some kind of calling or purpose on their life. But before we dive into that, I wanted to start by asking you, what is something that is bringing you joy right now?
Well, right now in my life is a unique time. I'm engaged, which I'm really excited. I'm going to be marrying the love of my life in October of this year. And I'm just finding right now that, a few areas of my life that I'm really enjoying and getting a lot of joy of. One thing I do as well is I have my own podcast. I also have a coaching side business, and I'm just really getting a lot of fulfillment and joy of the people that I'm connecting with and that I'm working with. And I just feel that at this phase in my life right now, it's moving in a really good direction, and I don't take that lightly. I don't take it for granted, and it's giving me extra reasons to wake up every day with optimism and joy.
That's awesome. And congratulations. I'm very excited for you. Could you share a little bit about your personal journey and what led you to become a transformation life purpose coach?
Absolutely, Melly. Like a lot of people, life can really provide a lot of challenges and struggles and hardships. And I just think that's a fact of life for everyone. We go through a lot of learning experiences. And with me, I do believe, like, ever since I was born, I've always just been a person that my family and friends and people close to me could confide and to really rely on when it came to just pouring out their heart and needing some extra perspective. And so I believe we're all relational human beings and we all have different gifts and talents. But I knew at a young age that I was just meant to be there for others, whether as a son, a brother, whether it's for my best friend, just people that I've been able to serve in and outside of my workplace. And like everyone else, I've also gone through some really big trials and hardships throughout my life. I am divorced, so that was obviously a very dark time in my life. I believe that all of us desire to want to find the love of our life and to want to make that person stick. Unfortunately, I went through heartbreak and I went through some mental health challenges throughout my life. And I knew that on the other side of whatever I was going through, and in this particular case, getting over a really big heartbreak to someone that I'd imagine I would have spent the rest of my life with, it wasn't easy, but one thing I do know throughout my life is God has never left my side, and there was always opportunities, even in the darkest moments, for me to look at my circumstances and to look at things from a different perspective, one that could allow me to grow through any really challenging experience. And so I decided to use everything that I've gone through, from loneliness to heartbreak to navigating life as a single guy for many years throughout my 20s and my 30s. I know how tough it can be, but I also know how beautiful things can be when you take a chance on yourself and when you decide to move forward and overcome things that really hold you back. So with my experience working, I'm in the fitness industry and really, in my time being a personal trainer and really using my gifts and skills in different environments and in different ways throughout my life, coaching others and really desiring to see other people make some big changes is something very dear to me, and it brings me a lot of joy and fulfillment and purpose. So for me, and this is obviously still I'm still a work in progress. I've only been doing this for roughly about a year and a half now, but I've never been more certain and more sure that this is something that is going to make a difference. And it lights me up. And that's normally a good indicator that you're doing something that's for you, is if it naturally fills your cup, ignites your fire, and brings joy to your life. So that's kind of like a bird's eye view of what led me to become a life purpose transformation coach.
That's awesome. And I love that you were able to reframe all of the things that had happened in your life into something positive to help others. That's one of my main reasons for starting this podcast in the first place, was I wanted to take the pain and the struggles that I had gone through with my divorce and having to start over and, get a whole new life together, to find a way to use that pain to then help others. So I love that. Can you talk a little bit about some of the biggest mindset shifts that you see people needing to make when they feel stuck in life, especially when it comes after one of these major transitions like a divorce or a big loss?
Yeah, for sure. When you are in the thick of it and you are having your world turned upside down, that can cause a lot of darkness. I know for me, it can cause me to ruminate and to overthink and to really focus on what that meaning of that event meant to me. And often we can assign personal meanings through really tragic events like a divorce or a heartbreak. And we can start telling ourselves lies that we're not worthy or that we're never going to be able to find this type of happiness again in the future. So for me, what was really pivotal as well, and this is obviously a given when it comes to the grieving process, but it's just coming to the point of accepting your circumstances for what they are. As painful as they are, the acceptance component of where you are is such a crucial one, because a lot of people can tend to remain stuck in the past and to wish they were able to return back to anything similar to what broke them. So acceptance is a huge one. Just letting go, that is, for me, that freed up a lot of space for me to be able to decide to focus on what it is that I wanted to focus on moving forward. So for me, being future focused and looking at my environment and my present circumstances for what they were, and choosing to, in a better lack of a term, make lemonade out of the lemons I was given was a very big thing. Right. And we can often find ourselves in really difficult situations when we're picking up the pieces of our broken heart. And we may be looking at our life circumstances and wondering, is this going to get any better for me? But the reality is that we have a lot more in control than we realize. And I've always tried to focus on the controllables. And the controllables for me was what's within my power, within my attitude, within my mindset that I can do in this present circumstance that I'm finding that's going to allow me to move forward and to have optimism and to have hope for what my next steps were. And so it can be very vulnerable, right? Because when you're looking at your life circumstances after a breakup and when you're feeling stuck, it can seem very daunting. And sometimes we sell ourselves short when it comes to what options we have available. But there's always new opportunities for us to reposition our mindset and our attitude towards what we can do to gain momentum in our future. And for me, Melly, one of the biggest things that I really wanted to take the opportunity to do once I was able to accept and let go of what those dreams were and accepting the reality was just to go on a path of being able to get a better understanding and a better self-discovery of what Chris's future was going to look like. And so for me, just being intentional on being able to understand what types of things were going to light my fire, what types of passions or hobbies or areas of my life that I wanted to focus on that was going to allow me to regain that spark. And also understanding during that entire process that my happiness, my sense of fulfillment and my worth, it reminded me that it wasn't based in my idea of being in the perfect relationship or being in a marriage or finding the love of my life. As great as those things are in life, when we can be able to understand that we can live a life of purpose and fulfillment in other areas of our life, because being in a marriage being in a relationship, that's just a part of the whole of our identity and of our life experience. And when we magnify and put so much meaning into one particular area of our life, and if for whatever reason that particular area doesn't work out for us, or if it's not living up to the expectations that we're hoping for it, then things can seem very bleak. And so we're just complex individuals and we have so much that adds value and meaning and identity to our life. And for me, discovering that in the midst of going through that heartbreak and being open to possibilities and areas of learning more about myself was very big. It was a very big component in reframing my outlook and on my attitude about what I can learn about myself during this transition period of my life. What was I able to learn about my experiences in that last relationship? I had to take ownership and say, Chris, what contributed towards this outcome? As unfair as it was, what types of internal lessons can I draw upon it so I can prepare myself in the future to be able to become a wholer and healthier individual?
I love that. That's great. And I think a lot of the listeners to this podcast, a lot of them have gone through divorce or maybe, just a very traumatic breakup. And you talk a lot about reclaiming your identity and that sense of like getting to know who you are now. Because I think for a lot of us, especially, coming out of a marriage, our sense of self really is kind of in that partnership, which is not a horrible thing when you're in a marriage to think of the two being together, but you do still have to have that sense of self. Otherwise, when, something tragic happens, you don't know who you are anymore. So in that, where would you say if somebody is in that place, they've just gone through a divorce, their whole sense of self has been rocked, where
Mhm.
should they start in rediscovering who they are?
Yeah, that's a really good question because when you're taking that step and when you are desiring to want to discover and to really get a better understanding of who you are and to feel connected to yourself and to feel secure in your identity, introspection and reflection plays a big role. And I always have found that even during my darkest of times when everything seemed to be crumbling around me, whether it was being let go from certain job positions or getting passed up for certain promotions and feeling deflated, and even in the aftermath of my divorce and just feeling stuck in my life. I had a great opportunity just to reflect and look over my entire life experience and to be grateful for parts of my life that have contributed to who I was as a person. One thing I found was, even leading up to my divorce and even afterwards, we live in a society where we really get judged based on status, whether it's the type of job that we have, whether it's the type of vehicle, whether it's the relationship status that we have. And it can be very draining in this world of social media and the comparison trap. What I found is when I was paying so much attention to the materialistic world around me and what society was deeming as having worth and having the perfect identity, things got pretty dark really fast. I had to remind myself that there's inner components of myself and my past and of who I am that are always going to shine in the world regardless of who I'm with or who I'm not with, or regardless of the type of fancy job title that I had. And so if somebody's really looking to regain their sense of identity, it's a great opportunity for you to just really become reflective and introspective over your life journey and to celebrate your wins, celebrate your successes. And the great thing is that we're a constant work in progress. I'm not the same person that I was even a year ago. And so what I have found that's allowed me to understand more components of my identity and discovering it is just taking risks in life and pursuing things that would normally scare you. For example, I've been sitting on the fence prior to becoming a life coach and going into podcasting. This was something that was sitting on my mind for about 5 years. I would think about it. I would get excited thinking that this would really bring out, parts of who I'm created to be and my purpose. But I allowed self-doubt. I allowed, aspects of my belief system to hold me back, and I made excuses for not going all in. And what I found that's really helped me step into discovering more of who I am and what I'm capable of is just being able to step outside of your comfort zone, and no matter how scary it is, be willing to take the risk, because it's always scariest at the beginning when you're going down a new path of self-discovery. But once you start putting in action, and once you start taking one step in front of the other, and dipping your toes more and more, something inside of you starts to light up even more, and you think to yourself, why didn't I get started on this sooner? And
Totally.
so for me, like, during those dark periods of being single, it gave me such a great opportunity in the moment to be able to invest in myself and my personal growth, to give myself the freedom to be able to go back to former things in my life that maybe I've walked away from due to the hustle and bustle that made me really feel in flow and really feel connected to my identity. Something as simple as getting out for walks again and spending time. You and I are both Christians, Melly, so obviously connecting to the word and reminding myself of who I am in Christ. It's not through what the world is going to tell me who I am, but it's reminding myself of the promises of who I am. And I'm a child of God, and ultimately that's the most important part of our human experience, is knowing who we belong to. But we also got work to do. He's given us gifts and he's given us talents to be able to make a difference in the world, but we need to cooperate in that plan. We have to be willing to take that leap of faith. And so we're a constant work in progress, Melly. What I love about this life and learning more about myself is that I'm learning more about who I am as I'm continuing to take risks and stepping out in faith. But there are intrinsic parts of who we are from the moment that we're born that will never leave us. And that's key to who we are. That's our character, that's our heart. And that is really those immutable intrinsic characteristics that we're bringing into the world. And it's not limited to just who you're with or who you're not with. Our purpose is much greater than that. So just reorienting our value system and where it lies is a big part of going down the path of self-discovery and our identity.
Yes, I totally agree. And, one thing that I've tried to do in my own journey is create these like little daily habits and practices, things that little small steps I can take forward to help me kind of step into who God made me to be. For me, that looks like gratitude journaling every morning when I get up, spending time in the Word, doing these little things. Are there any other daily habits or practices that you'd recommend people maybe give a try if they're in this place of trying to find that purpose and clarity?
Well, what I've been doing recently, and this is something that I do with my clients, and this is very straightforward, but it's always good to, like you said, you're journaling. So what I recently did is I wrote down my vision for what I'm desiring my life to look like, in terms of my behaviors, in terms of my career trajectory, in terms of where I'd like to see myself with my family, my hobbies and interests. So I wrote down a personal vision statement. And what I've been doing is on a daily basis, I scheduled it out to, and a reminder on my phone to read that out loud on a daily basis. It's important for us to write down our goals and the direction that we desire to go in our life. And I've been finding that by taking time on a daily basis to review and to read that out, it's allowing me to walk more in alignment, and it does affect my subconscious and my conscious efforts and behaviors on a daily basis that are going to walk more in alignment with the direction that I'm going. A lot of us have great ideas in our head and in our mind of what we want, but often
Mhm.
those thoughts can dissipate and we can lose that inspirational thought or idea. And so being able to set some time aside each and every day, just like we do when it comes to reading the Bible and praying, and then just reviewing the anticipated direction that you have for your life, it makes a big change. Some other things that you mentioned as well, Melly, which I think is really important, is incorporating things on a daily basis that will fill up our cup of peace, right?
Mhm.
When we're going through life and when we're too focused on career or personal growth, or if we're focusing on our goals, that's great. But a big part of our human experience is to incorporate activities and habits and whatever that might look like for each person, that's going to give them a sense of balance, give them a sense of peace and a sense of enjoyment in this human existence. We live in such a hustle culture right now that people aren't taking nearly enough time to recharge their own battery. So for me, what really allows me to be reminded and to be in sync with my life path is really just physical activity. With my background in health and fitness, it's been such a huge clutch for me. So, getting out to the gym in the warmer months, getting out for a nice walk out in nature, being around creation, that just does something to me. It reorients me. It puts things in perspective. It gives me more clarity about what's happening. That's a big thing. For other people, it could be music. For me, I really enjoy listening to some progressive house. It's just type of music that really allows me to start thinking creatively and getting off the phone and just enjoy being still. Those are just simple things that, for me, really allow me to get through each and every day without feeling overwhelmed and feeling more connected. And of course, reading, right? Reading is also a big thing as well. I got some really good books that I'm reading right now that's giving me a lot of stuff to chew on in terms of my direction. Whoever's listening right now, whatever that looks like for you, that allows you to be recharged, that gives you more meaningfulness, that gives you more joy, and that allows you to balance out the hectic stresses of life, I would strongly recommend filling up your cup of what contributes towards your personal peace. It'll really help.
I totally agree. And also, you mentioned, get off your phone. I would say, too, like, I just know when I was going through my divorce and right in the middle of it, it's easy to just kind of get trapped in that, like, doom scrolling or, doing something like getting on the dating apps, which is not in and of itself a bad thing. But if you're in that moment where you're really struggling and looking for clarity, maybe just take a detox time of getting off of those apps, getting off the social media for a while and just allowing things like nature and just reading the word, I think can really help as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you often hear this term about finding your inner child and this healing journey that a lot of us need to go on when we face the storms of life. And I found, at least for me, when the end of my marriage occurred and subsequently the months after, when it came to my healing journey and going to therapy and re-engaging with parts of myself that I neglected for many years, that reminded me of who I was and my roots. That's really a big part of this healing process. And regardless if you're single or not, the feedback that I've been getting from people around my age and stage in life right now is when they've had the opportunity to reconnect with that inner child, with that person of your identity that's always been there, and that just desires to want to have a life of happiness and enjoyment and fulfillment. That's a great journey to be on. And when you're intentional about getting there and getting rid of the distractions like spending too much time on the phone and being willing and raw and honest and vulnerable to be able to face your insecurities through, whether it's working with a therapist or whether you're willing to just sit with your thoughts and acknowledge and journal and write them down. It's very liberating because I'm sure you can relate, Melly. Like, we go through these stages in life. When you get out of high school and you're entering the workforce, you're focused a lot on wanting to make a really big impact and climb up the corporate ladder. And during those formative early adult years, we can really focus and desire the approval of others and want to live up to what society deems as success. And then there's this phase that happens that, as we get older and even into our 30s, we can experience divorces, we can experience unmet expectations, and life humbles us in many ways. And eventually we find ourselves searching to find that part of ourselves that has never left, but that's always been there, and that's been driving our desire to want to, make it and thrive in the world. And for me, at least, into my mid to upper 30s, finding my inner child and just reconnecting and reminding myself of what is it that I'm actually really desiring, for this life, and what kind of impact do I have, and what do I need to shed when it came to those people pleasing and those other types of mindsets that really weren't serving me well. And so it seems to be a very common theme with people at this age and stage in life where they're seeking that sense of peace and that new direction in their life where they're no longer being driven by the need to appease others or even have these types of titles in their life, and they really want to feel comfortable in their own skin. And I was very grateful to use that time before I met my fiance, and that time I used and I intentionally used leading up to that was so formative, because I was able to truly feel secure and really good about learning more about myself and who Chris is. And that's such an important period for those of you who are listening and you're in that waiting period right now. It's such a unique opportunity for you to develop new belief systems about who you are and increasing your potential and your confidence when it comes to trying new things, preparing yourself for when you do meet that future someone. You'll be healthier and you'll be more whole and you'll be in a better position to be that partner.
Yes, I love that. And I think, like you mentioned, all these things, they're kind of at this age and stage that we're at in life. It doesn't actually even matter if you are married, single, partnered, your purpose doesn't change. And so being really clear on who you are and what it is that, lights you up and what you are here specifically for, I think, regardless of whether you're single or married, is a very important journey to go on. But at the same time, sometimes it can be really hard for people to hear that when they are really kind of just seeped in the loneliness of singleness. And it is hard, as somebody who, you went through a divorce and you were single and now you have met somebody. But what would you say to a single person who is saying, yeah, this is all great for you, but like, what about me right now? I'm struggling with this.
Well, I would listen, I totally understand what that's like. I remember seeing, friends in my former church community and former work environments when I was living back in Toronto. I was seeing them move on with their lives. People were having kids and they were getting 1 to 2 year, 5 year marriage anniversaries. And here I was living my worst nightmare, and that was having to start from scratch and having the love of my life follow through. So I would say I totally identify and I understand what it's like to be on that receiving end of what that may look like when you're facing that really difficult challenge. If I was to go back to that former Chris and give him a pep talk, even though that former Chris wouldn't know how his future would look, I would just remind him, and I would remind anyone listening, to not give up and to not allow the loneliness and the feelings of hopelessness to drive you into a state of resignation where you're no longer going to believe that there's going to be something better for you. This life isn't easy, and having a state and an attitude and a character of perseverance and persistence and resilience, even in the midst of seeing other people succeeding and you feeling like you've been stuck in this transitionary waiting period for much longer than you'd like. But our focus really does matter. And I'm ashamed to say that I spent a lot of my time, in those certain circumstances, really focusing on my lack of, and for better, term, like I was having a pity party a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I had to, and sooner or later, I realized that when I was done, feeling sorry for myself, and understandably so. I wasn't trying to guilt trip myself for feeling sorry. These are legit feelings that come in, but I often found that I would stay in that sense of self-pity and sadness for longer than I should have. And
Yeah.
I also, one thing that Melly and whoever's listening, I was a big person that compared myself to others. Comparison really was a very strong, toxic component of my life. And I found that the more that I was looking at others, the more it would affect me negatively.
Right.
It would allow me to procrastinate. It would allow me to just feel like giving up because I felt like it wasn't the point. Even with coaching and podcasting, sometimes I can catch myself falling in the comparison trap. So I would encourage you guys, anyone who's listening, to just remind yourself that your journey is yours alone. And we don't know other people's trajectory and what got them to where they are right now in life, but we do have control over what's ahead of us. And so I would encourage you guys not to give up, to believe that your future and what's ahead of you is something that's going to be worthwhile and positive, but just understanding that what we're doing right now with the time that we have, it really matters. For everything that we lose, we gain something else. And for everything that we gain, we end up losing something else. And this was a quote that I heard that really stuck out to me because I was too focused on what I was losing out in my life that I didn't have the opportunity to really take a look at how I was able to grow through those really difficult and challenging seasons of loneliness and difficulty on my own. And it really strengthened me. It really prepared me and equipped me to be able to get through future challenges. And I know that this is going to continue to equip me, not only to help myself and to help other people. And so if you find yourself really being steeped in this loneliness trap and looking at other people succeeding and wondering why it hasn't happened for you, I would acknowledge that it's okay to feel those, experience those feelings of sadness. I would really encourage you to continue to stay focused on what you desire and what you anticipate to achieve in the future, and to remind yourself that you do have a hope and that you do have a future. The time that you're going through right now isn't to waste, it serves a purpose. But the level of speed and the quality of those lessons and understanding that purpose is dependent on our decisions and our choices on how we are going to choose to reposition our attitude and our mindset on how we are going to grow through this. And what silver linings, as bleak as they may seem in your life, can you start opening up more, and you can start focusing your energy and your time on growing in, right? There's growth opportunities even in the loneliest and difficult times of our singlehood. And it requires courage, it requires risk. But our reality starts to change when we make the decision that we're no longer going to be defined by the relationship status or the emotional states that we're in. We have a choice to push on and move forward. And to be honest with you, it wasn't easy doing it alone. I would avoid friends and family out of shame and guilt, and I would carry these burdens alone. And I needed to get out of my pride and ego, and I needed to seek out people in my life who loved me, who cared for me, friends, church community, family members, and get that necessary encouragement and confidence increases by being around people who love you and care about you. But we do need to make a decision to move forward, despite what's happening. And it's a courageous one, but we can't do it alone. Whether it's through the help of a therapist, a coach, a best friend, a church group, a podcast such as this, relatability and knowing that we're not alone is a huge encouragement, because we carry these things. We carry them internally. And when we carry things alone and we don't share things, the magnitude and the weight of our problems seems so heavy and so big. But the moment that we can understand that other people are actually experiencing what we're experiencing, it lightens a load off of us, because now we understand that what we're going through, it isn't so unique and individual and isolated. And in fact, we're talking about loneliness, Melly. That is a huge area in people's lives right now. And for a long time, I was ashamed to admit it, because for me, loneliness equated to weakness and to the fact that there must be something wrong with me because I shouldn't be lonely. And the fact that we're openly talking about this is huge, because for a lot of people, it can be very difficult thing to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. Just hopefully, if you are listening to this right now and feeling, this loneliness, hopefully just hearing Chris and I talk about this, you see that you are not alone in the loneliness. And sometimes finding others who have gone through what you're going through, or who are even right in the middle of it themselves, can be so healing. I know that when I was going through my divorce journey, I found a group. It was through a local church where they started meeting online because it was in the middle of COVID, and then moved into in-person meetings. But it was all people at that same stage of life. And there's just something so healing about being around others who can relate to what you're going through. So definitely, if you are feeling that loneliness, try to find a community. And it doesn't have to be this huge group. I am personally, more introverted than extroverted. And so I tend to prefer to have just a few close friends, but that's fine. You can have just a couple of people that you go to, but don't try to do it alone. That is going to make it feel even that much more lonely. And, as someone who is still single, and I went through my divorce, it's coming up on 4 years now, which is crazy. I can say with certainty that, yes, I do still feel loneliness. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but I
Mm-hmm.
have found ways to connect with others. I have found ways to connect with God, and I am definitely not the same person today that I was when I was in the midst of it. Another thing you said was to make a choice to move forward, and I think that's really important too, is making that choice. And within that choice, I actually wanted to dive into a little bit about limiting beliefs, because I think
Mhm.
that's an area where, people get tripped up and they don't even necessarily understand the concept of this. So could you talk about some of those limiting beliefs that you see maybe coming up with your coaching clients?
Yeah, for sure. The thing about limiting beliefs is that they can feel so real and legitimate to us because limiting beliefs can be beliefs that we 100% believe to be true in the moment, no matter how contradictory it may sound to someone that cares about you or that knows you. But really, limiting belief systems are ingrained belief systems that we've adopted, usually from our early childhood years, that have been conditioned and that have been imprinted all throughout our life, and often we're not fully aware of them, and they do guide our life decisions, and they can even hold us back, and they definitely do hold us back, hence why they're called limiting beliefs when it comes to our potential. And often these belief systems arise from the meanings that we give to really critical events in our life that have really impacted us. Like the first 7 years of a childhood life is so formative because you're really just looking at the world around you. You're looking at your family members and those closest to you, and you're basically just trying to gain an understanding and an internal map of what the world looks like. And because we're living in a fallen world and life isn't perfect, when certain events do happen, in my case, my parents got separated when I was younger, and my mom was thrown into a single mom role for many years. The meanings that I associated to those types of events, such as, having your parents split up or experiencing, getting bullied in school, those meanings that we assign to that are going to stick with us throughout our life, and they're going to influence and they're going to show up, all the way onto our present moment. And so, normally, a great way to identify a limiting belief is just to take a look at a really deep problem, a really big issue in your life right now that you've been dealing with for a while. It could be related to your self-confidence, to your fear, to your attitude towards what the future may look like. And if we end up really getting to the root of what that problem or that fear is like, we're eventually going to get down to our limiting beliefs. So for example, I'll just get a little vulnerable with you guys. So as I was gearing up the courage to pursue life coaching, there was something, and podcasting and even just getting out on social media and getting myself out there more. There was just this internal insecurity and just this block inside of me that was procrastinating and that was making excuses for why I was not pursuing this particular direction as aggressively or as much as I wanted to. And I really had to be very honest and vulnerable with myself and ask myself, why am I feeling this way? I was able to admit to myself that, well, what if I fail, or what if people are going to perceive me the wrong way? What is this going to mean to me? Well, this is going to mean, that people aren't going to like me, that I'm going to be judged, and that I'm going to fail again in my life. Losing your first wife is not only bad enough, but then for you to put yourself out there in front of the world and to not achieve the type of outcome that you want, that can really hit you personally. And so I just had to so it's a great exercise that you can go through where you can just ask yourself, okay, if your worst case scenario about this direction in your life unfolds, what will that mean to you? And what will that mean to you as a result of this? And eventually, if you get really honest with yourself at the end of that questioning, where you're continuing to challenge, well, what will that mean to you if you don't get the approval of others? Well, then I'm going to look like an idiot, and I'm not going to live up to my purpose. And well, what would that mean to you if you were to look like a failure and not to live up to people's expectations? Well, then I would feel worthless, right? And so for me, my limiting belief was that I felt that I wasn't worthy enough, and that I didn't have what it takes to be able to impact others and to make a difference in the world. And so our limiting beliefs are very tied to our strongest fears and apprehensions about the direction we'd like to take in life, but it's holding us back. And we have to ask ourselves, what's really holding me back? And I was a shy kid growing up. I got bullied. My mom was a single mom. And so my feeling of worth and my belief that I wasn't worthy or I was unlovable, those were core beliefs that showed up throughout my life when it came to, heartbreaks that I experienced, or when it came to unfulfilled career paths that I've had earlier in my life, or especially when it came to pursuing life coaching and getting myself out there and getting more familiar with speaking in public. There were limiting beliefs that I needed to identify, I needed to address, but I also needed to have the courage to be able to take that step forward regardless, and to develop new belief systems of being able to gather up evidence throughout my life that was able to contradict those very belief systems that were holding me back. But those belief systems are very much intrinsically connected to parts of our life that are really causing us internal insecurities and fear. And so that's normally a good path to start on, is to identify what those are, and then to ask yourself, if my worst case scenario was to happen in this particular area that I'm fearing, what would that mean for me? And what would that mean for me? And eventually you're going to get vulnerable and you're going to come to the realization that there's parts of ourselves that are holding us back. And when we can honestly address those, it's very liberating.
I totally agree. And another thing that I like to do with that exercise too is if you are in that mode of like, what would happen and you're going through like worst case scenario, okay, so say I fail at this, then what? What does that mean about me? Then take the opposite view and, just allow yourself to dream and allow yourself to have some vision about, well, what if I succeed? What does that look like? Sometimes we can get so stuck in that limited belief of like, oh, I'm going to fail, nobody likes me or whatever. But what if the opposite were true? It just kind of can help to sort of allow the person to see the other side of things a little bit. So if you find yourself in that mode where you don't, you're worried to step forward, look, I mean, I started this podcast. Before I started this podcast, this is something I always wanted to do. And I kept trying to find a co host, and I would find somebody, they would agree. We would start mapping out episodes. We would have meetings. We would have all this stuff. And then they would back out. And so I had this belief like, oh, nobody wants to work with me. Nobody wants to,
Mm.
it can be very limiting. But then I thought, what if I did it myself? And it was like, why not? Like, I don't know why that didn't dawn on me before, but allowing yourself to like go through that exercise and then dream as well, I think can be really healing and helpful. And, you know, here we are. I went ahead and did it myself, and I'm quite pleased about it.
Yeah, and that's amazing. That's amazing because that was obviously a really big obstacle that was preventing you from getting to the next level. And I loved how you mentioned the importance of redirecting our attention and focus on what we do want to achieve. It can be so easy that for people to just focus on what they don't want to feel like, or what place in life they don't want to remain in, that they're not really giving careful thought and attention to what it is they do want. And so
Right.
when you're able to redirect your focus and your growth towards what you do desire, instead of trying to run away from what you're not trying to be, it really plays a huge role, because then we can actually start to confidently move in a direction where we know that we're going to be in that process of achieving and becoming that type of person that we know we're capable of. And that's huge.
Yes, I totally agree. So when it comes to like, moving forward in your purpose, what advice would you give to someone who feels like they need to wait, to start? Maybe they feel they need to wait to find love. They need to wait until they know exactly what to do. They need to wait until life is easier. Like, what advice? Because I think that can be kind of a sneaky limiting belief that gets in there.
Hmm.
Like, oh, I'm good. I could totally do this, but I have this other thing I have to wait for first, and that can hold us back. So, what advice would you give to that person?
Well, I would say just from personal experience, I waited a lot, and looking back, it's unfortunate. Unfortunately, I can't turn back the hands of time and do things differently. But procrastination and waiting for the right ingredients in your environment and the right conditions to be able to take action, although it seems like a smart idea, it really it really isn't, because we're always going to be chasing a level of perfection before we're going to finally feel confident and take that step forward. And honestly, confidence and momentum and direction in life happens when we focus on taking action right away and not going after that perfectionist type of attitude and that environment for things to be perfect for us to go forward anyways. Understanding that you got to give yourself grace, that as you're continuing to put yourself out there and when you're choosing not to wait for the right time, you have to give yourself grace that it's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be pretty. A big thing about moving ahead in life and taking that risk and taking that courageous step forward is just adopting a growth mindset. Because a lot of us, we think to ourselves, yeah, but if I go ahead and I decided to pursue this direction in life, maybe take that different job opportunity, or maybe put myself out there, what's going to happen if I fall short, or if I don't do things exactly the way I hoped? And what's that going to mean for me? And that can really be very discouraging, and it can really allow us to climb back to that original state of not wanting to take action. But a growth mindset is one that, as we continue to move forward and learn, we're learning as we go, and embracing setbacks, embracing hiccups along the road, or even failures, and looking at those as opportunities to get more clear as to the desired and the right direction and the right method to go about doing things is best done when we are in action and changing our belief systems towards how things may turn out if they don't work out exactly the way that we're hoping. So developing a growth mindset, an open attitude of acceptance and learning, and understanding that, like, confidence and clarity comes from taking action. It doesn't come from waiting for the perfect conditions to arise before taking action. It's just being willing to take messy action moving forward, but knowing that as you're doing so, you're going to continue to gain more confidence and clarity in the direction and in the journey that you're going. So, an example, Melly, as I was training and developing more skills to become a better life coach, I got caught up with procrastinating and waiting for the right time to press the record button on my phone and to speak on a particular topic or send out a specific word of encouragement. I always tried to wait for the right wording to be written down on paper or inside of my head. Even recording podcasts, I would just try and wait for the right type of creative juices to be flowing before I thought that I could press that record button and publish a podcast. And what I realized is that just by taking that leap of faith moving forward and being comfortable with what you have already in front of you, and understand that, like you and me, our first podcast compared to our latest podcast is going to be a lot different in terms of our skills and our abilities. But we need to be willing to courageously take those first steps, developing a growth mindset of what I can learn and how I can enjoy this journey to become a better person. And that plays a big role. And it's the same with dating, and it's the same with putting yourself out there. Don't wait for the perfect conditions to be able to strike up a conversation with different people that you see at church or at your local gym or whatever extracurricular social gathering you find in. Just be willing to put yourself out there and to take a genuine interest in other people, and over time things will improve, right? But
Yep.
what the biggest thing that's holding us back, Melly, is taking that first step. We get so paralyzed with perfection and the right conditions that waiting for that perfect environment prolongs much longer than we would have hoped for. And so just being willing to take the plunge and keeping an open mind about it makes a huge difference.
I totally agree. I love that. Yes, if we wait for everything to be perfect, all conditions to be perfect, we'll never act, because life is not perfect and it's messy, but that's what makes it beautiful. So if you are listening to this podcast today and you're like, you know what, I am going to take the next step, whatever that looks like, applying for that new job, approaching that man or woman at church that you want to ask out, whatever it is, I want to encourage you to just take that step and then message me over on Instagram and let me know what you did. It's always good to, share your wins, have a little accountability. And if it doesn't go as you had planned, think of it as not a failure, but feedback. Just a lesson to learn. I heard that quote. It was in a training I was in a couple months ago. There's no such thing as failure, only feedback. And I really loved it because it is such a great way to reframe that, oh, I failed. I did the wrong thing. No, you learned something. Maybe that particular person isn't for you or that particular job's not for you. Great, because that means you're one step closer to what is right for you.
100% million. And you know what? This may seem like common sense. And if somebody's having that aha moment listening to this and saying, yeah, like you're right, it is that simple and it's true, right? And when we're younger, we develop that growth mindset when we were younger and learning, how to pass those exams and get in school and go up from grade to grade. But as we seep into our adulthood, we can get stubborn and we can put ourselves in boxes and we can really allow these limiting belief systems to paralyze us and to prevent us from taking action for fear of what it may mean to ourselves and how we're going to be perceived. When in reality, this life is just a continuous learning experience. And when you can free yourself from that self-judgment and those limiting belief systems and give yourself permission to be able to do things imperfectly, but knowing that taking action is going to increase your level of confidence and just openness for what life has to offer. It's a beautiful, freeing feeling. And we're not here trying to be perfect, right? We're just trying to become better over time and to feel more in alignment with who we're created to be. And we could all use that attitude and that level of initiative and courage. So I fully agree with what you said.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. This has been such a great conversation, and I'm sure listeners would agree. I highly encourage you. In the show notes, I will have information about how to follow Chris on Instagram and his podcast as well. So I highly recommend that you do that. And Chris, thanks so much to everyone listening. I just want to say be well, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thanks again, Melly.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll dive into more of life's big topics with a sense of humor and without toxic positivity. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and if you could leave a review, that helps the show reach more people and change more lives. Thank you so much.